Hello, everybody. Good. Tonight, we are going to answer the question that we ask every year, which is, do we eat dairy on Shavuot? Now, that's a great question. First of all, let's point out why it's such a good question. There is a tradition to eat meat specifically on the holidays, on our Shalosh Regalim, our three major holidays of the year, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. This was a time of feasting and celebration in the city of Jerusalem, where one would bring sacrifices and eat meat, maybe for the first time in months. So eating dairy is kind of strange. When you take into account the idea that these were holidays where one would, celebrate it with meat eating. So I want to kind of amend the tradition of eating dairy first. Actually, the tradition is not to only eat dairy. Rather, the tradition is to eat dairy as the first part of one's meal, but then to have meat as the second part of one's meal. So one would have, in the same way like on Passover, one might begin the meal with a hard-boiled egg before having the rest of dinner. So too, one would have a dairy meal, like a dairy snack maybe first, and then their meat meal. And you can do that. You can have dairy, and if you're very traditional, you'll wait a half hour, rinse your mouth out between dairy and meat, but you don't have to wait, the 3 or 6 or however long you wait hours like you would if it was meat first and then dairy. And the reason is, for all of our holidays, one would bring to the temple 2 sacrifices. One would bring a sacrifice called a chagigah, that one would sacrifice specifically for the holidays, and then the special offering for the holiday itself. On Passover, it's the Passover. On Shavuot, it was the first fruits. And on Sukkot, it was assorted offerings for Sukkot. So there's a tradition to actually have 2 cooked dishes, the first one being dairy. And so that has kind of changed into, at least in the communities I've been a part of, this being a dairy feast. I haven't been in a situation where I've been served a lot of meat on Shavuot. Rather, it's full of cheesecakes and ice cream and lasagna and all kinds of delicious dairy goods. And so tonight, we answer the question, why dairy? So let's just jump into it. I know you're all, waiting and excited. So I've prepared 10 different answers on why we eat dairy. And the reason there's so many is just because there's not one really good answer. This is a tradition that we've inherited, and there's been more and more answers given as to why dairy. Okay, so the first place we're going to go to, I'm going to be using my JPS Tanakh, and you're welcome to follow along with me if you'd like. We're going to turn to Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim, chapter 4, verse 11. Okay, and that is going to be on page, if you want to follow along. Page 1733 in the JPS. So if you look at the top of the page, the verse is this. Sweetness drops from your lips, O bride. Honey and milk are under your tongue, and the scent of your robes is like the scent of Lebanon. So these verses, of course, are between 2 lovers talking with each other. And the traditional interpretation of Song of Songs is it's God talking to Israel. And here, this line, from your lips, O bride, honey and milk are under your tongue. Well, what do we do with our tongue in Torah study? We teach, we repeat words. We ask God that we make the words of Torah sweet on our tongue every morning in tefillah. And so here, this line, honey and milk are under your tongue, became euphemistically it would refer to Torah, if it will. Oh, so honey and milk are in your tongue. So you have, there you go, milk from Shir HaShirim. And so here, Torah is being compared to milk. I realize maybe euphemistically was not exactly the correct term, but here, suffice it to say, the honey and milk here is meant to refer to Torah. So that's reason number one. Here in the Song of Songs, you have Torah being compared to milk. And so therefore, Shavuot being the holiday where we celebrate God giving us the Torah on Mount Sinai, we celebrate by eating dairy products, which remind us of the Torah according to Song of Songs. Okay, now, that's reason number one. Let's look at reason number two. We're going to go to Psalms chapter 68, verse 16. So we're going to turn back. Psalms chapter 68, verse 16. If you're following along in the JPS, we're on page 1492. In the book of Psalms, it says, O majestic mountain, Mount Bashan, O jagged mountain, Mount Bashan, why so hostile, O jagged mountains? Toward the mountain God desires as his dwelling, the Lord shall abide there forever. So on the surface, it looks like there's no reason that dairy products and this poetic verse about mountains should be combined. But actually, let's look at the Hebrew. We had, O majestic mountain, Mount Bashan, O jagged mountain, Mount Bashan. What is the word for jagged in Hebrew, you ask? It's Gav Nunim. So Har Gav Nunim means jagged mountain. This is referring to Mount Sinai. And obviously that's important because on Shavuot, that is where God took us to give us the Torah. And so here, that word Gav Nunim sounds an awful lot like Givina, which of course is cheese. So here, it's not the Torah that's milky and cheesy, it's Mount Sinai itself. So we eat dairy products according to this, if we were using the argument according to this psalm, because dairy products remind us of Mount Sinai. Okay, so according to Song of Psalms, dairy products remind us of Torah. From Tehillim, dairy products remind us of Mount Sinai. Let's keep going. We're going to go now into the Torah, the book of Numbers, chapter 28, verse 26. Now, I have to say, I don't like picking favorites, but this one might be my favorite, out of all 10 reasons. Verse 26, I'm going to read it in the English first. It says, On the day of your first fruits, that's Shavuot, your feast of weeks, when you bring an offering of new grain to the Lord, you shall observe a sacred occasion. You shall not work at your occupations. Okay. What do dairy products have to do with that? Well, the verse itself is about Shavuot, but where's the milk? Here it comes. Ready? Let's read it in the Hebrew. Uvayom habikurim bahakrivchem mincha chadasha ladonai b'shavuotechem. When you bring a new mincha offering to God in your feast of weeks. Okay, listen to this. Mincha chadasha ladonai b'shavuotechem. In English, it meant a new mincha offering to God in your feast of weeks. But those three words, chadasha ladonai b'shavuotechem, the first letters of those words spell out the word chalav. Chet from chadasha, lamed from ladonai, and bet from b'shavuotechem. So here there's a secret. When it says you shall bring your new offering to God, hidden there in the first letter of each of those words is the word chalav, which of course means milk. So now, according to the book of Numbers, we eat dairy products not because it reminds us of Torah, or not because it reminds us of Mount Sinai, but because in the verse about bringing your sacrifice to the temple on Shavuot, the first letter of each word spells out chalav, which is milk. Okay, so no, we already have milk reminding us, not just milk, dairy products in general, reminding us of three very important facets of Shavuot: Torah, Mount Sinai, and the bringing a new sacrifice on Shavuot. Okay, let's go to another one. Let's go to number 4. I'm just going to keep on moving right along. Shemot, Exodus, verse 23:19, I think. Here, let's check it out. Exodus 23:19. If you're following along, we are on page 163. This is another time of the Torah where we are commanded to bring a special offering on Shavuot. If you look at verse 19, it says, "The choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of the Lord your God." And note, this is the only holiday where we really focus on, these first fruits. When you harvest your soil, you're supposed to set aside the first and best of the produce, and this becomes your offering in the temple. Now here, you have that commandment again. "The choice first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of the Lord your God." Where's the milk? What's the connection here? Keep reading. Look at the very next verse. "You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk." There you have it. The very next verse, after the verse about bringing the special Shavuot offering, the book of Shemot, is the mitzvah not to cook a kid in its mother's milk. So what do? On Shavuot, we have a tradition where we try to express to God that we are that we adhere to this commandment so fervently that we do have meat and milk at a meal, but we eat the milk first, just to show how extra, aware we are of this commandment not to have meat and then milk. So if you're going by the book of Shemot, the reason that we eat dairy products on Shavuot is simply because in the commandment to bring one's sacrifice on Shavuot, the very next line of the Torah is about milk, and specifically not cooking a kid in his or her mother's milk. Now, those are 4 different explanations, by the way, which is pretty good if you ask me, but we're going to get to 10 tonight. Number 5. This one comes from the Mishnah Brura, who quotes it in the name of another Gadol. I don't think he mentions which teacher he learned it from, but we're not going to look in the text because his is more of a story. He says, after receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai, the Israelites all of a sudden had new and somewhat complex laws about the meat they could eat. It wasn't enough to just eat meat and not partake of the blood, which is a commandment all the way from Genesis. It wasn't enough to eat meat and not have it be from an animal, not have it be raw from a live animal, which is also a mitzvah all the way from Genesis. But now there's laws about shechita, about kosher slaughter, about salting, about getting the blood out of the flesh of the animal, and it takes a lot of time. If you've ever shechted an animal, you can raise your hand if you have shechted an animal before. Chickens. Then you'll know that it takes time. The shechting is quick, but after that, the defeathering, the gutting, to check to make sure that it's glatt, that the lungs are clear of any lesions, and then the salting. It takes at least a good 6 to 7 hours. If you're doing everything by hand, from live animal to ready to eat. So here, the Israelites wanted to celebrate having just received the Torah. But now they had all these, strictures they had to follow to in order to eat meat. So what did they do? They had a dairy meal first. And then later, the meat was prepared after the kosher slaughter and the salting. They were able to have a meat meal only later. And so we kind of relive that timeline, where on Shavuot we first, receive the Torah as it will, just by being Shavuot. But we kind of live out that order by first having our dairy meal, just like the Israelites after receiving the Torah had a dairy meal and then a meat meal after. So in that way, that explanation is really sweet, because it kind of connects everything. It connects Torah, connects Sinai, and it really puts us into the story, as if we're kind of reliving what happened at Mount Sinai. Okay, so the next 4 are connected to the word chalav. One of them I've heard before. 3 of them I have not heard, but I'm sure I'm not the first to think of them. So the word chalav, we already mentioned the word chalav. Remember, mincha chadasha ladonai bishavuotechem. That word, those first 3 letters spell the word chalav, which means milk. That's our key word of the night, is chalav. And chalav in gematria is where each letter has a numerical equivalent. The word chalav is like this. Chet is 8, lamed is 30, and bet is 2, spelling out, or equating to 40. So let's take the next 4 reasons for having dairy on Shavuot, and let's dedicate it to the number 40. Reason number 6. 40 days Moses was on the mountain receiving the 10 commandments. 40 days Moses was on the mountain, and so it took Moses 40 days to receive the Torah, and so we eat food that reminds us of 40, of how long it takes, or it took Moses to receive Torah. So when we eat milk, it reminds us not necessarily of the Torah itself, like Shir HaShirim, but of the process of receiving it. Another 40. The word hagbel. Hey gimel bet lamed. So why is this word so special? Hagbel means to create a border. Now, the word hagbel is used in the book of Exodus. It's the commandment that Moses gives to the Israelites right before receiving the Torah. Hagbel also equals 40. That's why we're talking about it. Chalav equals 40, milk equals 40, and so does Hagbel, which is to create a surrounding, a border. That word is very important, because that is, if you were with us for the Hasidut class on Saturday night, we talked about that word as being an important commandment for the Israelites, who in the moment of receiving Torah were so in awe and connected and in love with God, but because they didn't have Torah, they had no mitzvah in order to express their love of God. And so Moses gave them one mitzvah. He said, Hagbel et Tahar, make a border around the mountain and don't go up. And so that commandment to Hagbel, to make that border, became kind of the vessel that held the Israelites' love at the moment of receiving the Torah. Another 40, Hagbel. So Hagbel, when we think about that connection to Chalav, it is about not Moses is receiving the Torah, but about the Israelites receiving the Torah and that one special commandment they had in order to make receiving the Torah possible. Another 40, Goel, which is a redeemer. This word, we don't think about redemption a lot on Shavuot, but it's also one of kind of the sub-themes of the holiday. We read the book of Ruth, which is about redemption. Ruth tries to convince Boaz, to purchase a field to redeem it, and so she goes out looking for a redeemer. And on Shavuot, we also celebrate that Torah leads to redemption. We do that through the book of Ruth, which is all about accepting Torah on oneself and the possibility of finding a redeemer through Torah. So here, that word goel also equals 40. And so when we think about that connection to halav, to milk, we actually are now going even beyond Torah, beyond Sinai. We're asking, what is it all for? It's for the purpose of someday being redeemed. Maybe in another conversation, we can go a little more into redemption. But suffice it to say, that's part of the holiday too. And also a connection to halav. Goel, redeemer equals 40. Halav. Another one, okay. This one, it may be a stretch, but I like it. The phrase yad b'yad, hand in hand, also equals 40. Yes, I know that one's a stretch, but I like the idea of the commandment for the Israelites to be around the mountain and to not go up. I love the idea that maybe they were holding hands, all together, united, ready to receive Torah together. Yad b'yad, hand in hand, ready to receive Torah. If we think about that connection when we're eating dairy on Shavuot, then it's about the Israelites receiving Torah and are receiving Torah, but it's also about the power of a unified Jewish community to receive Torah. And it's only through unification and remembering that as a community, we're all really one, that we can actually receive Torah. And then finally, number 10, the reason for milk is because we call Torah, and this one's not about 40, Torah an Eitz Chaim, a tree of life. And there's nothing that signifies life more than milk. This is, for mammals, the thing that is the difference between life or death, for a newborn baby. And the Israelites, being a new people, newly formed out of Egypt, the Torah became their life source. And so we eat milk, we drink milk, and we eat dairy products as a connection to the Torah to remember that Eitz Chaim Hila Machazikim Ba, that it's a tree of life, who take hold of it. So you have your pick. 10 reasons, at least half of them are really good. So you at least have 5 really good reasons why we eat dairy on Shavuot. And to recap, it's connected to Torah. Some of these explanations, were to connect dairy with Torah directly. Some of it was about receiving Torah, Moses receiving Torah, the Israelites receiving Torah. Some of these were specifically about Mount Place, where God gave us the Torah. Some of these were about the sacrifice, the special mincha offering that one would bring to the temple on Shavuot, where connecting us to the generations of Jews, who also celebrated being recipients of the Torah. And then one of them, at least, was about even beyond this, what's it all for? Why did God give us the Torah? For the purpose of redemption. So, eating dairy on Shavuot is it's no laughing matter. It is a connection to all of the major themes of the day. Look, there's not much we have on Shavuot. We don't have a booth that we sit in. We don't have matzah to eat. But we have this one tradition of having delicious dairy products, and it seems to come from nowhere. But actually, it is connected to every major theme of the holiday: Torah, Sinai, Moses, the Israelites, and even redemption. So with that, I'm going to take a look just to see. Oh, except for somebody wrote here, except for hard cheese. That comment must have been earlier. So I had missed it. I'm sorry, Sparks Skid. I had missed that comment. But I hope we answered it over the course of this conversation. So I'll open it up just for 1 second. If there are any questions from the live chat. If there aren't, then we'll close it. And then we're going to learn together Thursday night, the 28th, in 2 days, on Shavuot, starting at 9:30. We're going to go through many of the most important texts about clothing to ask what is the major theme that the Torah wishes to convey about what our clothes mean. What is the power of clothing? What does it represent? So with that, I look forward to learning with you all on Thursday night at 9:30 p.m. Pacific time, and we'll see you then. Okay, have a good night, everybody.